Hi guys, James at Rampant Lion Reviews again for you today with another beer review. For this one we are going to stick to Scotland, but we're going to head up to the Orkney Islands, and this is the first set of islands that are just off the northeast coast of Scotland. Meant to be a very, very beautiful part of the country, but somewhere I'm still to visit. But I never know how correctly to refer to this brewery. They're known both as the Swannay Brewery and also as Highland Brewing Company, but regardless they do some very tasty beers, and this is my third review from them. So we're going to have a taste of the Orkney Blast, which is described as being an English strong ale, and the beers reviewed previously from these guys, it was the Orkney Best and also the Orkney Porter. As I say, very, very nice, so I'm quite looking forward to reviewing this one for you. But as always with my beer reviews, I'll take you through a very brief history of the brewery. It will only be 2 or 3 minutes long, but if you want to get straight to the tasting, just fast forward. The brewery website's in the description for you below, along with a link that will take you to my other Swannay Brewery reviews, and hopefully I can add to that in the fairly near future. So just to tell you a little bit about Orkney before we crack into the brewery. Orkney is the first set of islands just to the northeast of mainland Scotland, and they're particularly famous for having some of the best preserved Neolithical sites in Europe, and some of these are over 5,500 years old, and they do have UNESCO World Heritage status. So if you're visiting Orkney, you should definitely visit Skara Brae Prehistoric Village, and it's interesting because this was only revealed in 1850 due to a very violent storm, and it ripped up a bit of the ground. Then they found all these rocks and dug it out, so a very, very cool exhibit if you do want to go there. But Orkney and Shetland are very interesting in Scotland because they have a very significant Norse Viking heritage, and this can be seen in some of the place names. For example, in Orkney and Kirkwall, which is the capital town, you've got St Magnus Cathedral, and many streets also bear Norse names. And incidentally, the Orkney and Shetland Islands were only given to Scotland in 1468. I believe it was Denmark or Norway. I think it was Denmark that gave them to Scotland, and it was to do with the dowry for a Danish princess marrying a Scottish king or something along those lines. So we're quite proud to have them in Scotland, and they're very, very beautiful parts of the country. I need to go up and visit them, but my mum and dad actually brought this beer back from me from Orkney, so quite cool actually, and a big thank you to them for that. But to tell you about the brewery itself, the Highland Brewing Company, or the Swannay Brewery as it's known locally, was founded by Rob Hill, and he's a vastly experienced brewer who was formerly of the Orkney Brewery, who are probably one of the most widely exported Scottish breweries, and they do some very good beers as well. But the first brews at the Swannay Brewery were produced in January 2006, and the brewery is based in an old farmsteading in Swannay on Orkney. I believe they're quite far to the north in the islands, but correct me on that if I'm wrong. But today they have 2 different brew plants, and they use these as required or however often time will allow. But this includes their original 5-barrel plant, which they call the small kit, and they've also got their 20-barrel plant, which they refer to as the big kit. As I say, go and read the website and you can get more of an idea. But both of their plants are second-hand, and they wanted to do this due to environmental reasons. A lot of the Scottish breweries are very environmentally conscious, which is obviously very good. But the company brew at least 4 times per week, and their fermentation space allows them to do up to 8 brews per week if they implemented both brewing kits. But the brewery are always keen for volunteers, and apparently you can just turn up at the brewery and take part in the brewing process. Apparently you can dig out the mash tun or the kettles, or you can just turn up at the brewery in your wellies and they will put you to work. So maybe when I go up and visit Orkney, I will need to actually have a go at that. It would be quite cool. But again, these guys are a very decorated brewery, as are many of the breweries in Scotland, and they've won numerous awards from various different organisations. But anyway, that's your kind of brief history of the Swannay Brewery or Highland Brewing Company, as I say, however you want to refer to them. But to list the other beers you can get from these guys, you get the Scapa Special, St Magnus, the Orkney Porter, the Orkney Blast, you've got Orkney Best as well, you've got the Orkney IPA, and also the Dark Munro as well. So hopefully I can get a hold of those for you in the fairly near future. They're actually quite hard to get a hold of in the mainland. I've not even seen these beers in Glasgow. My mum and dad, as I say, brought this back for me from Orkney, so hopefully I can get up there and get a few more of their beers at some point. As I say, very beautiful part of Scotland. But without further ado, let's get on to the actual tasting of this beer itself. This guy, as I told you, is a 6% English style strong ale. It's meant to be a very nice beer. It's got really good ratings on Rate Beer and Beer Advocate from what I've seen. You can see the artwork on there. It's a merman and a mermaid. The merman actually has like a sort of sergeant stripe on his arm. I'm not sure what that's about, if that's just part of the artworks, but they've got, it looks like he's riding a seahorse or something and he's enjoying a good beer. but you can see Rob Hill's signature just in the top corner there. And on the back it does tell you a little bit. It says Orkney Blast, a world-class strong ale. The name and label are derived from Orkney's World War II Forces newspaper and was printed on Kirkwall by the Orcadian newspaper, which still prints to this day. And it tells you a little bit about the thing. It says the summary of this beer is a stunning stronger ale in the true British fashion with balanced flavours from Maris Otter malt and English and German hops, early and late in the copper. One to take great care with, as it is so drinkable. Drink in place of wine with a meal, and it accompanies most foods, and it serve at 12 degrees or a wee bit cooler with seafood. So yeah, it's the cask version of this beer apparently won the Camera Champion Beer of Scotland in 2010, so should be a really nice beer for us to try. So without further ado, let's get this guy open and we'll get on with the tasting here. So as you can see, nice slightly smoky opening on this. You can smell the fruit on this, incidentally, as you open it up without even paying too much attention to it. But I really hope I can get up to Orkney and explore at some point in the very near future, because one of the most beautiful parts of the country. There's no trees up there just because of how open and exposed it is. So there's no trees in Orkney, which is meant to be quite a funny thing to experience, but most of the Highlands are like that, very, very few trees. But as you can see, this beer is poured a really nice kind of bright goldeny amber. I'll just bring up the light and let you see the colour of it properly, but it's a nice bright goldeny amber. You can't see really how bright it is just because of where the light is, but if I bring it over here and put it over the beer, you can see just how kind of bright it is. But I'll shift that away because it can be a bit of a pain. There's a finger of a frothy white head there. It's not even creamy, it is more of a frothy white head, I would say, is coming off this guy. If I put my fingers behind it, you can see that it's not transparent at all. I can see the other side of the glass but not through it, but it looks really, really nice. There's actually quite a bit of carbonation visible on this, a lot of little bubbles just firing up towards the bottom of the head there. No visible sedimentation in this guy either, but it looks a really, really nice beer. So let's have a look at the aroma. So it's quite an interesting one. It actually smells a bit like a bitter. There's a good sort of cereally presence coming out of this. So you've got a nice big kind of bready malt base and some kind of caramel and biscuit sweetness. There's almost a kind of little bit of a woody element to it as well, I would say. But there's a good kind of spicy cereal presence, a sort of grainy, almost oaty note coming off it. But if you sugar it up a little bit more, you start to get some kind of fruitiness coming out of it. You're getting the grassy and slightly aromatic-y hops, I think. But they're quite mild. It is more of a malt-forward beer, I think, on the aroma. But you can pick up a little bit of an orange juiciness from the hops too, which is quite interesting. Slightly orangey citrus. And there's a little bit of kind of a kind of earthiness coming out of it too. That mixes quite well with the sort of cereally characters you're getting out of this guy. It's quite a sort of spicy aroma. So maybe the aromatic hops are coming out and mixing in with that a little bit. But yeah, a nice kind of toasted caramel in there. A little bit of biscuit and some bread, but I think the cereal presence is quite strong. That's mixing with an earthy hop and a little bit of aromatic character. There's a definite grassy presence and some citrusy fruit. I think it's quite orangey, but there could even be just a teeny little bit of a sort of piney resin in there. But there's a lot going on in the aroma of this beer. So as I always say, do pay attention to the aroma of your beers and just give them a little smell before you try them. But without further ado, this is the Orkney Blast, an English style strong ale from the Swannay Brewery in the Orkney Islands of Scotland. Cheers. That's really nice, actually. It's quite interesting because the first impression of this beer is that it's very, very smooth, and I can see why they say that on the back. Be careful with it, because at 6%, you know, if you drank one or two of these, probably maybe two or three actually, if you drank two or three of these, you probably would be quite well gone, and you can taste a little bit of the alcohol in this. But yeah, you've got a nice sweet malt base in this. I think the caramel and the biscuity flavours are quite prominent. It kind of blankets the tongue. You've got a nice big bready malt base to this, but you've got caramel and biscuit flavours that just go right down the middle of the palate there. And I think you can pick up just a little bit of that woodiness to it as well, so it's really quite interesting. yeah, you get just a little bit of a kind of woody sweetness, and that's just towards the front of the tongue in this one. And you're picking up, I think there's a definite slightly orange fruity character to this. There's a lot going on in the flavour of this beer, and you can one thing I've always said in the videos that I've done for this brewery is you can see why they are quite decorated. Their beers are really tasty and there's a lot going on in them. Yeah, it's very well balanced. I mean, I'm not the greatest fan of some of these English real ale beers, but this guy is done really nice and it has a lot of flavour in it. So as I say, in the middle of the palate there's a nice bready blanket there. You've got some caramel and biscuity sweetness that just goes right down the middle of the tongue, and there's a little bit of woody sweetness to it which just kind of pushes towards the front, but there's a definite kind of cereal, slightly spicy character, but it's not overly done, as it's not overly prominent as some of these kind of English style bitter beers are done. It's just a nice blend in the flavour and you can pick it up, and some of these English bitters go really too far with the cereal spice and it just loses a lot of the character of the beer, but this guy is beautifully done. It's just a nice complement to this bready character that's in the beer, and it's a highly sessionable beer. That's all you can really say about it. But yeah, we've got that really nice malt base, and around the edge of the tongue you can pick up just towards the back, you're getting a little bit of a nice earthy character, and that complements the sort of the kind of mild cereal blend of flavours you've got on the middle of the tongue there. Around the front edges of the tongue you're getting a little bit of a grassy hop. It's not too dry actually. This is more of a malty beer, I think. The hop character isn't too drying, but there is a teeny bit of the dryness there. So around the front kind of curve of the tongue you're getting the grassy flavours coming out, and then as you move further back you're starting to get a wee bit of the aromatic-y bit, and that's when it gets a little bit more dry, just as you move from the curve of the tongue into the back and where the earthy character comes out. The earthy character actually provides quite a nice balance, as I say, between the sort of cereal flavours in the malty part of the beer, and also it helps move into the aromatic flavours from the hops too. So the flavours in this beer blend together really, really well, and it's nicely balanced. But just behind the front of the tongue you're getting a nice little bit of citrusy flavour coming out. I think it's a little bit of orange actually, and it blends together quite well with that sort of slightly vanilla and woody flavour in there. So there's a lot of stuff going on in this beer, so just pay attention to your palate. But a nice malty, bready and slightly doughy malty feel, some nice caramel and sweet biscuit going down the middle of the tongue, bit of cereal blended in there and some woody flavours too, bit of orange just behind the front of the tongue, earthy character on the back sides of the edge, some aromatic character as you move further forward, then a nice grassy hop around the front edge of the tongue. In terms of the mouthfeel of this beer, I'd say it's definitely mid-bodied. Actually, in terms of the mouthfeel, it feels as if it's come right out the cask. It's very, very smooth, and you've got a nice malty sweetness to it. And as you move into the aftertaste, you do get a bit of dryness, particularly around the front kind of corners of the tongue. And it's just got a nice little bit of dryness, but it is more of a malty sweetness. But the dry character does build a little bit in this beer as you go through it. But overall, it's a really, really nice beer, and if you are into your sort of English real ales, then to me, this one kind of stands out. Even though it's a Scottish beer from the Orkney Islands, it is beautifully done, and I'd rather drink this than some of these kind of beers that masquerade as real ales and say they're bitters. This guy is so much better than that, and it's, you know, if I wanted a kind of tasty sort of golden session ale, if you like, then this is the one I would go for. It's really beautifully done, and the flavours blend together really well. So if you do enjoy a kind of nice golden style of beer with a little bit of cerealness, some nice malt base and just a little bit of hop character, this is what you want. I can see why it pairs with a lot of good foods. So do check it out, and as I said, the other beers I've had from the Swannay Brewery are very good as well. So with this brewery, if you just went along and said, I want a beer from this brewery, and just pick a style you like, and you will not be disappointed with it. A very, very good brewery, and one of the best in Scotland perhaps. So yeah, I hope you've enjoyed this beer review. As I say, this is a really nice beer, and it's a very good brewery, so go and check them out. Please let me know in the comments section your own thoughts on this beer, if you do happen to have tried it before. Hopefully I can return to this brewery in the near future if I can find somewhere that sells the beers. But please like, subscribe, share, all the usual YouTube stuff. Hopefully I can do another Swannay beer review for you soon, and I will be back with more Scottish reviews for you in the fairly near future. Slàinte.